Thanks for taking a minute today to stop by BrainsTeam Opera. Today we're going to be telling you about the brainstem. The brainstem is located anteriorly and partially inferior to the cerebellum. The brainstem plays a key role in the central nervous system by linking the spinal cord to the cerebellum in the brain. The brainstem consists of three main parts: the medulla, the pons, and the midbrain. The first section we'll go through is the medulla.
Thanks, Kimbo. The medulla oblongata, commonly known as the medulla, is a cone-shaped neural mass located most caudally in the brainstem. The medulla extends through the foramen magnum to the atlas, where it transitions into the spinal cord. There are four autonomic functional centres in the medulla: the respiratory, responsible for breathing regulation; the cardiac, responsible for heart rate regulation; the vasomotor, responsible for blood pressure and other homeostatic processes; and the reflexive, responsible for actions such as vomiting, coughing, sneezing, and swallowing. Let's focus now on the anatomy of the ventral surface. The ventral surface consists firstly of the pyramids, which descend into a decussation marking the border between the spinal cord and the medulla. This structure contains motor fibres of the corticospinal and cortibulbar tracts. Damage to this area of the medulla can lead to weakness in all four limbs, difficulty swallowing, and speaking. The olives are oval structures located laterally to the pyramids and play a role in motor learning and functions, and also in the auditory system. The anterior median fissure extends along the entire length of the medulla, transitioning into the spinal cord. This area provides a groove which carries the anterior spinal artery. The dorsal surface can be broken up into two sections: the superior or open section, where the fourth ventricle forms the dorsal surface of the medulla, and the inferior or closed section, where the fourth ventricle narrows at the obex in the caudal medulla and surrounds part of the central canal from the spinal cord. Features of the dorsal surface include a posterior median fissure, which is a groove confined in the closed section of the medulla. Also unique to the closed section are the gracile tubercle median to the cunate tubercle. The gracile tubercle receives sensory information from the middle thoracic and lower limbs, whilst the cunate carries function of fine touch, vibration, proprioceptive information from the upper body by the spinal nerves.
Wow, Kate, I didn't know there was so much to know about the medulla, and juiced in time as well. Keep your eyes peeled like this potato, because I think it's time to hear about the pons.
The largest part of the brainstem is called the pons. It can be described as horseshoe-shaped and features a collection of nerves situated within the anterior portion of the posterior cranial fossa. Overall, it is situated superiorly to the medulla, inferiorly to the midbrain, and anteriorly to the midbrain. It can be divided into two primary anatomical components, that being the dorsal and ventral pons. Functionally, the pons contains cranial nerves essential for activities such as sensory function, speaking and swallowing, with other cranial nerves relating to motor activities such as eye movement and facial expression. The anterior surface of the pons contains cranial nerves 5 to 8, that being trigeminal, abducens, facial, and vestibulocochlear respectively. The bulging of transverse pontocerebellar fibres make up the anterior surface, which wrap around the brainstem in a vertical fashion. As such, the nerves contained within the anterior segment of the pons are essential in allowing a large range of human activities to occur, as previously mentioned. Damage to this area, for example, by way of a pontine glioma, can lead to fatal consequences. However, the anatomy can assist in diagnosis, For example, cranial nerve damage can be assessed via eye muscle movement. Posterior surface connects to the cerebellum via the middle cerebellar peduncles. The fourth ventricle is also contained within this region and is exposed when the cerebellum is removed. The facial nerve is an important component to consider in this region.
It's time to learn about the midbrain, the last but not least, but most rostral section of the brainstem. The midbrain can be separated into two sections to identify its key anatomical features as seen in the diagrams below. The rostral and caudal sections. These are separated based on whether the inferior or superior colliculi can be identified. Let's start with the caudal midbrain. The inferior colliculus is a large nuclear structure that relays auditory information. It receives ascending inputs from auditory relay nuclei of the medulla and pons to the medial geniculate nucleus of the thalamus. Damage to the inferior colliculus impairs the central nervous system and can lead to hearing loss. The cerebral aqueduct is surrounded by grey matter. Here we can identify two lemnisci, the spinal or lateral lemniscus that ascends in the lateral pons and caudal midbrain, and the medial lemniscus that transmits conscious proprioception, pain, and temperature from the body to the thalamus and cerebral cortex. The rubrospinal tract facilitates flexor motor neurons of the contralateral side. The cerebral peduncles contain the corticobulbar, corticospinal, and corticopontine fibers. The corticospinal tract contains descending motor fibers ventral to sensory. If the cerebral peduncles are damaged, this can cause upper motor neuron paralysis, devastatingly affecting limb movement. Moving up to the rostral midbrain. Here we can see the superior colliculi, which receives visual input from the optic tract fibers, from descending fibers that form the tectospinal tract, and from movements of eyes and reflex movements of the head and neck. It is interesting that we know the effects of damage to the inferior colliculi involved with hearing. However, the effects of damage to the superior colliculi involved with vision is largely unknown. We can also see the cerebral aqueduct, the spinal and medial lemnisci, and the corticospinal tract. Here we can see the red nucleus, which is the start of the rubrospinal tract. Lesions to the red nucleus are likely to affect coordination, however, these effects are still partly unknown. Above the cerebral peduncles, we see the superior cerebellar peduncles, which contain ascending fibers from the cerebellum to the red nucleus and thalamus. The effects of damaged superior cerebellar peduncles is ataxia of movement. Lastly, here in the rostral midbrain, we can see the substantia nigra containing dopamine neuron projections to the neostriatum and GABA neuron projections to the thalamus, which regulate motor functions. You may have heard of the importance of dopamine function because damage to the substantia nigra can lead to loss of dopamine neurons, which causes Parkinson's disease.
Wow, Emily, that sure was a lot of information.
That's true, but what a productive and fruitful lesson this has been.
I know I sure learned a thing or two about olives.
I'm very disappointed in these puns.
Orange, you glad she didn't say puns?
I hope to sparked your interest today.
Thanks for watching!